You're not too young or too inexperienced to claim your pregnancy and birth. Hi, friends. I am your host, Tiffany, and thank you so much for being here on the Birth and Rebirth podcast. I am sharing a bit about my pregnancy at 17 years old, and I'm addressing the ageism that is in the birth world. We know that it exists, and we know that many mamas face this when they are past that 35-year mark. But I want to talk about the young mamas, the mamas who are looked at as inexperienced and not knowing what's best for them. And I just want to give you some encouragement today and tell you that you are not too inexperienced to claim what is rightfully yours. I hope you guys enjoy. So if you've observed anything in the birth world for even the slightest bit of time, you'd know that ageism is such a thing. You're either too old to have babies or too young to know what's good for you and your baby. It's almost like you have to fall into this small time frame of about 8 years, give or take. I'd say the ages that women get judged the least for their age is around 26 to 34. And honestly, that's being gracious. Like, people are just so judgmental about women's ages. But anyways, any woman younger than 26 is viewed as the mid-20s chick who has no idea what she's getting herself into. And any woman over 35 runs the risk of being categorized as high risk, right? Quote unquote. You really just can't win. And I specifically want to speak on a topic that I feel isn't talked about as much in the birth world, or maybe it is and I'm just living under a rock, but it's the idea that young pregnant women don't know what's best for themselves, and that you have to carry some degree of wisdom to be able to claim your own birth. And for those of you who don't know this part of my story, I became a mom at 17 years old. So in this episode, I'm going to share about my experience being a teenage pregnant woman, and being a teenager with these desires for something more than just your typical hospital birth experience, and just how little support I received in that desire. I want to sort of dissect these judgments about being a young mom in hopes to spread this awareness around the stigma, and to also be of some encouragement to young pregnant mamas out there who desire more than the status quo, more than the transactional hospital birth experience. To say you don't need any special status or any, crazy wisdom to tap into the blueprint that literally lives inside of you. Your God-given right to have a sacred physiological birth. So I'm gonna start with my little teen mom story. So I had just turned 17 and I got pregnant with my son, Dylan. And I knew I was pregnant before I even missed my period. I was so connected to my body even at that age. I felt my breast tingling, and I just felt different, and I couldn't explain it. But I remember sitting in the front of my house telling my best friend, I think I'm pregnant. And she was just like, what? Like, why are you so calm? And honestly, I was excited. But I was scared, but I knew I was pregnant, and I just kind of already accepted that before I saw the, two pink lines on the stick. But I ran to CVS around the corner, peed on the stick, got the immediate positive. I called my mom. My mom is like my best friend. We've had our ups and downs, but she's always been like my ride or die. So I told her, like, Mom, you need to come home. I told her I was pregnant when she got home, and she looked at me and she was like, Tiff, if you want, I will take care of this baby while you go to college. And after you've gotten your degree and all of that, if you want to come home and you want to, be in his life full time, then fine. And I was just like, no, I am a mother. It was just so instinctual. Like, no way. This is my baby. I am going to do what needs to be done. I wanted to take full responsibility for the life that was growing inside me. And I appreciate my mom, offering that and all, but absolutely not. Like, that is my baby. So from that point on, like, everything changed. I graduated high school early because I was a nerd and I was already taking college courses at that time. But weird, like, part of that whole thing was that I was in a really prestigious high school, and they had never had anyone get pregnant before, so I was like the first, and they did not want that reputation, so they literally negotiated with me to transfer me out to my zoned high school, which was like not a good high school, but that I could graduate early because of all the college credits that I had been getting while I was at that school. So manipulative, weird, but I accepted it because obviously didn't want to be in school while dealing with, preparing for motherhood. So I watched The Business of Being Born, and of course my mind was blown because everything resonated with me even at that young age. I knew I didn't want a hospital birth. I wanted a home birth. I wanted a water birth just like Ricky Lake. I was so pumped. I was so excited. Like, I knew it was going to be an incredible experience, and I just was so excited. But no one shared that excitement with me, and no one understood like what I was even thinking. And when I tried to make the moves to like get the dream birth that I want, there was just not support. There wasn't support from my parents. There wasn't support from my insurance. I mean, it was just so many hurdles. So I ended up just settling for a midwife to birth in a birthing center. And to me, I was like, oh, that's like the next, like, that's like the best that I could get. This is great. This is going to be great. My first appointment was just so awkward. I felt my age definitely was playing into the treatment that I was given. The way that like the front desk lady was speaking to me, and just like my midwife was so belittling, and I told her I wanted a natural birth, and she like, kind of like rolled her eyes and smirked at me and was like, you have no idea, like what you're getting yourself into. She also made a lot of comments about my weight, like my weight gain. And honestly, my weight gain wasn't crazy. Like, I mean, I gained weight, I think overall throughout the entire pregnancy, maybe gained like 55 pounds, I want to say. But I was really slim. Like, I never went back to my pre-pregnancy weight, like, ever again. I was so skinny before I had my son. So, honestly, like, a lot of the weight I could have used on me anyway. So I just was like really taken aback by the judgment on my weight, and I was super sensitive to it because I had struggled with like body dysmorphia for all of my teen years. And I walked out of all of those appointments crying. And one day I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't. This is so stressful. Um, she had like told me I need to practice self-control and that I was lucky that I didn't have gestational diabetes, but it was like probably because of my age. So, it made no sense. So I was just beyond like disenchanted by the whole experience. Like I didn't want to hire another midwife because like in my head, I'm like, maybe they're all like this. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are enjoying what you're listening to, please take a second and give me a 5-star review. It helps these episodes get seen by more women who need to hear these incredible, important stories of sovereign birth. Thank you again. So I just hired an OB. I figured I'm just gonna do what everyone else does and stop trying to like be special and just submit to what everyone else is doing and what is like, you know, told to us as being like the right thing. So I just got my OB coming out of the abusive dynamic that I had with my midwife. Honestly, it was a breath of fresh air because this guy was just so chill and never once commented on my weight. Just never made me feel bad about my body. And because I had that just such a contrast of experiences with the midwife versus, you know, this just like really kind, gentle man, like OB, I was like, oh, like he's worthy of my trust, you know, like this is like a kind person, like he knows what's best for me. So it was really easy for me to just kind of submit to everything that he suggested. My son's birth was really easy, honestly. And mostly because, you know, now looking back in hindsight, it's because I submitted to all of the interventions. And thankfully, my body and my baby responded well to it all, unlike a lot of other stories that I have witnessed and heard. I was induced because I went past my due date slightly by like maybe a couple days. And, you know, I was induced at 10 a.m. and my son was born by 10 p.m. I pushed for maybe 20 minutes, if that. The nurses like looked at me and told me I was made to have babies. And they told me that they were expecting that I'd be pushing for hours. Wow. But that is proof right there that our bodies know what to do. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are. Your body is going to know what to do. Like, we carry the blueprint. And I didn't even have a physiological birth experience. My birth was completely augmented. And my body still knew what to do. And as clueless as I was to, like, intellectually, I did not really learn much about birth prior. I loved listening to birth stories. I loved watching The Business of Being Born. I watched a couple other documentaries as well. I forgot the names, but I I certainly didn't have the wisdom, the understanding of physiological birth and all of that like I do now. Yet my body still knew what to do. So, anyways, so there's just so many stereotypes and judgments that people make about young mothers, just like they do older mothers. Neither are acceptable. Being put in a box, being judged based off of your age or a label that they give you really plays into your experience. I submitted to the authority that was in the room, being my OB, the nurses, after being completely disrespected and traumatized by this awful midwifery care that I received during my pregnancy with my son. I tried really hard to have a natural birth. I wanted that so bad. And I was laughed at and I was judged and I was broken down with really mean comments about my body and about what my body wasn't capable of doing in their eyes. And so that's why I submitted, because it was so much to fight against all of that. I was exhausted. But this is what I wish I knew back then. That desire I had so deep within me to have a natural birth and to be connected to the experience in every single way instead of running away from it, that desire is so innate. It is so innate. It is built in us to desire that. It's so natural for us to want the birth that our bodies were literally designed for. I didn't need anyone's validation in that. But because I was seeking that support, and I didn't find that, I gave up because it was just too hard. And it felt too lonely on the path, and I didn't feel ready to walk that alone. I didn't know I could walk it alone. So a cookie cutter hospital birth experience that I didn't even want was what I chose. I chose that. But maybe if I had listened to a podcast like this, or if I surrounded myself with some wise women who truly trusted birth, who could share stories like these of power and embodiment, the ones that like we hear on this podcast and so many other podcasts, maybe I would have trusted that inner voice that I had, that burning desire I had to be a woman, to be a mother. I don't need validation from anyone else but God. I know that now. But at 17, I didn't have that confidence. And it's nice to have validation from the people around you and support from the people around you. But if it's not available to you, like it wasn't available to me, and I know it's hard, especially when you're young, it feels really daunting, but you can still reject the status quo and you can choose birth on your terms in the way that your soul truly desires. You can stand up to the mean midwife. You can fire her. You can choose to stay at home. You can say no to the induction. You can trust that your body can birth your baby. And I'm not just speaking to teen moms here. I don't want to, get that confused. I was a teen mom when I was navigating through this challenge, but I'm really talking to all of the young women who deeply desire a physiological birth, sacred motherhood, something bigger than what we're taught. It's yours to take. It's your birthright. You don't have to be 30-something years old to be allowed to embody that power. You have inner wisdom that literally surpasses anything that a midwife or an OB can offer you. You don't need to outsource support because you have the blueprint in you and you just have to tap into it. You're not too young to birth on your terms. You can birth on your terms even if it's your first baby. You don't have to go to the hospital or to the birthing center for your first birth because you don't have enough experience yet to be allowed to then choose your home birth for the second time around. You don't have to take that path. Actually, the best way to truly break the generational curse of births being sabotaged, you start from the beginning making better decisions the first time around. You don't have to have a story like mine where, your first birth was completely sabotaged and taken from you. Your second birth, sabotaged, taken from you. And now, God willing, my third birth, I will absolutely choose differently. I will choose what I want. I will own my birth experience and I will choose to take radical responsibility for my body and my children and my birth. You can choose that the first time. You don't have to have the traumatic experiences to then say that you have some kind of wisdom to carry into your next experiences. You don't have to choose to do things the way that everyone else around you is doing it. And even if it's scary, you can choose faith over fear. You can choose love over fear. And you can have the blissful, sacred home birth, unassisted birth, free birth, autonomous birth, sovereign birth, whatever it is you want to call it, as long as it is on your terms, as long as it is done the way you want it to be done. You deserve that, mama.